Welcome to Aging Together, a podcast dedicated to exploring the challenges and opportunities of caring for our aging loved ones. This podcast is a product of Caregiver Consulting and Healthy Solutions, a private consulting practice dedicated to helping you navigate the aging process with ease. Together, we will dive into a wide range of topics, including health and wellness, financial planning, caregiving, and more. This podcast is for everyone, whether you are an older adult looking to age in place, a caregiver seeking support and guidance, a young or middle-aged adult planning for the future, or simply someone interested in learning more about the aging process. I hope you'll join me on this journey. Let's navigate aging together. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode at Aging Together. I'm your host, Pooja, and this week we are targeting National Nutrition Month with a topic on nutrition and aging. Last episode, I briefly touched upon the importance of good nutrition on healthy aging. Today, we're speaking with a registered dietitian about the specifics of what good nutrition entails, especially as you age. I'm so excited to introduce our guest speaker today, Hiral Patel. Hiral, thank you so much for joining me in this discussion today.
Hi, Pooja. Thank you for thinking of me and having me on your podcast.
Let's start with telling us a little bit about yourself, how you got into nutrition, and what your credentials mean.
Sure. I was born in Illinois, but was actually raised in Pennsylvania. So I recently moved back to Illinois after I got married. So it's fun to experience the new coast, or I guess the Midwest. I studied at Drexel University, which is in Pennsylvania, and I've been a dietitian for 5 years now. I've had quite a few different experiences professionally, working in acute care, long-term care, independent living, and skilled nursing facilities in Pennsylvania and New Jersey. As far as how I got interested in nutrition, I've actually had an interest in food and nutrition for as long as I can remember. It's just, I guess it's not something you were taught, in your younger years, but I wanted to also help other people through my profession. So when I was looking into different careers, I had come upon dietetics and I was reading up on it and I was really interested in it. So that's what I decided to get into.
That's amazing. I, for one, am so glad you moved back to Illinois so we can hang out with each other.
I know, that'll be super fun.
We all know that nutrition is important at all stages of our life. However, I feel like there are a lot of discrepancies in how people approach nutrition, especially as they begin to get older. So I'd like to start with my first question for you. Is there a difference in how nutrition should be viewed as young adults versus as we age into middle-aged or older adults?
Yeah, so of course, nutrition is always evolving and there's always new studies out there, but basically diet and nutrition play important roles in supporting healthy aging. So there are general dietary guidelines for aging individuals, which focuses on meeting different nutrients or modifying your dietary intake patterns to address different changes in your health and nutrition status. But as we age, that can definitely differ because your metabolism is changing, how you digest foods and absorb them into your body, and then of course your lifestyle changes as well. Good nutrition across the lifespan helps prevent chronic disease, and we know that it's never too late to make improvements to support healthy aging. So older adults are at higher risk for chronic diseases such as cardiovascular disease, diabetes, and cancer, as well as many other health conditions related to the different changes in muscle and bone mass, which can lead to osteoporosis. The good news is that older adults can mitigate some of these risks by eating nutrient-dense foods and maintaining an active lifestyle. With older adults, generally, they have lower calorie needs, but their nutrient needs are basically the same as younger adults. This is basically because they have less physical activity, changes in metabolism, or age-related loss of bone and muscle mass. Nutrient needs in the population are also affected by chronic health conditions, so basically different uses of medicine, changes in body composition. So basically, overall, I think having a healthy dietary pattern and making good nutrition choices as whatever stage you're in is always a good rule of thumb. So you want to make sure you're eating more fruits and vegetables, whole grains, dairy, and then cutting back on those added sugars, saturated fat, and sodium.
I think you alluded to some of this already, but what are some key myths and facts related to nutrition as we age?
So I know there's one that I've heard is where elderly people need to eat less as they get older. So this is a myth because, metabolism slows down and your energy output decreases, but food and eating remain like key to aging. It's good for elderly people to just eat particular foods that are more rich in protein, vitamins, and minerals. Another one, so malnutrition, this myth is malnutrition is a normal part of the aging process. So malnutrition can actually affect anyone at any age, and it's not just the older population. Yes, it's more prevalent in the elderly population, but anyone at any age can be malnourished. And you just have to be aware of those signs, of course, in like acute settings or, in senior living care centers, it's more noticeable, but even in just a normal middle-aged adult, it's just something that could very easily happen as well. Another myth that I'd like to touch on is that supplements are sufficient. Of course, we can't live off vitamins and supplement tablets alone because the body works best when it is working. So basically, when you're eating actual foods. Most supplements promote that it helps older patients live longer, boost memory, and fight dementia, but that isn't typically the case. It's better to make sure that you're having a good, healthy diet and making sure you're eating foods that are rich in vitamins and minerals, and then supplementing with a vitamin to make sure you're getting those appropriate needs that you need for your age.
Those are some really big myths. I know I've definitely heard them myself, and it's really important that, we educate the community to know that these are myths and the actual healthy advice is to actually eat healthy food and not just take supplements or eat less.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. Is there a difference in nutritional needs between men and women as they age? And if so, what are they?
So, of course, the essentials of a healthy diet are pretty similar for men and women. You eat when you're hungry, you stop when you're full. You're choosing fruits, vegetables, whole grains, protein, and dairy sources that are low in saturated fat. The recommendations do vary by gender. Men generally need more calories and also require higher total intake of each macronutrient, while women need fewer calories than men, but in many cases, they need higher vitamin and mineral needs. Adequate intake of calcium, iron, and folic acid are also special importance for women. There are also differences mainly depending on what stage of life you're in. For example, a woman could be pregnant or breastfeeding, and so those needs would definitely be higher versus when they're like a young adult or even as an adult male, depending on what stage of life that male is in as well. So it differs a lot, but overall, for good nutrition, you want to keep it pretty simple and just eat a well-balanced meal and just making sure you're getting each food group.
What are common nutritional deficiencies that you find in older adults? And of course, it's very important to discuss this with primary care doctors, but what are some preventative measures we can take to minimize these deficiencies?
Typically with older adults, they might not be like eating enough protein. So you want to make sure that they're eating enough protein, which helps prevent the loss of lean muscle mass. But older adults often eat too little protein, especially between ages 71 and older. And then since most older adults are meeting recommendations for meats, poultry, and eggs, it's important to remind them that seafood, dairy, and fortified soy alternatives, beans, peas, and lentils are also great sources of protein. These protein sources are also beneficial in providing additional nutrients such as like calcium, vitamin D, vitamin B12, and fiber. As you age, the ability to absorb vitamin B12 is a little bit harder, and also with the use of certain medicines. So it's also pretty important to get that level tested if that's a concern. Most professionals can help older individuals with this, but another good source of vitamin B12 is breakfast cereals. So it's really important to talk to your provider if that's something that is of concern.
I feel like I'm learning so much from this because I definitely didn't know about the vitamin B12. I'm barely 30 and I've had a vitamin B12 deficiency for years, and I didn't even know that just like breakfast cereals can help improve that.
Yeah, I know, it's pretty interesting to hear that. Like most people are educated on, I guess, even most of the B vitamins, right? Because it's not something that they teach, because we don't really have a class on nutrition for like just us as like kids, or in college. Like that's not something that is taught, but I'm glad you're learning something too.
I feel like it needs to be a required, like mandatory learning in elementary school.
I totally agree with you. I think that would be so beneficial, and I think it would definitely change the view of how people look at like food. Like I think if they know more, they're better to implement things versus being like, oh, like my doctor told me this, right? You're less likely to want to follow it because a health professional told you, you
Yeah,
know? Hmm.
100%. And I feel like some of that also comes with like cultural stuff, right? And like how different cultures can impact different food choices and how that impacts health in the long term. So, in your practice, have you seen or do you have insight into kind of how cultural considerations impact healthy eating habits, especially if one family member is like beginning to get older or if there's young kids at home, kind of how that dynamic plays out?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think because the United States is such a melting pot of culture now, I've definitely seen different patients with different cultural backgrounds. So, some families eat different foods or like they stay away from different foods because of religious reasons or even just how they cook certain items. I've seen that, of course, in like the Asian Indian culture, we're kind of heavily prevalent on carbohydrates. So that's definitely why most Asians are probably suffering from diabetes later on in life, but you don't want to take away from their cultural foods because that's kind of like a comfort for them, right? Like most families have immigrated from different countries and like food is probably the one thing that's a familiarity with them. So kind of just want to keep food as like that still that same kind of feeling that comes from it. So you want to make sure that they're enjoying their meals. So maybe you're having them eat a little less of like a carb heavy meal, but they can still enjoy it by like sharing meals with friends and family. You're putting them in that phase of actually enjoying that food versus telling them that they can't have something. Another thing that I've noticed is like as we age, ability to chew and swallow foods changes. So, some people might not have the best teeth anymore, or they're just lacking in the saliva that you need to swallow your foods. So I think it's really important to be aware of where, if you have an older family member, where they are in that phase of, if you're noticing them not wanting to eat, maybe it's because it's not fun for them, right? Or it's not as easy for them anymore. So it's always good to be aware of just being aware of that situation too, because I know, of course, we're not all as perceptive as we want to be, or you're just in your own world. But it's always nice to look out for your older family members just to make sure that they're doing okay at meal times because mealtime is not always fun for everyone. And then another thing that I always try to tell people is food safety is important. I know for some families, coming from like a lower class or you're trying to make ends meet and maybe food safety is not your first priority or just like unlearning things that you've learned from when you were a child. But food safety is definitely important because as we age, we can't fight certain bacteria or viruses or foodborne illnesses as much as we could when we were younger. So it's really important as we age to be aware of food safety as well.
I love that you touched on the ability to chew or swallow foods because I definitely see that a lot, especially in the hospital
Mm-hmm.
where we have these older patients who, one, they're not feeling well, two, they most likely don't have their dentures with them in the hospital, and three, they're just like, hospital food sucks. And so it's like the worst possible combination you can try and bring to somebody
Mm-hmm.
when they actually need good nutrition to fight off whatever they're in the hospital with, but nothing is actually supporting that.
No, yeah,
It's,
I totally agree with you because I mean, I've seen it in nursing homes too. Like these patients that come in and all they really want is just like a good meal, and that's not something they can get, right? With everything else that's going on with them. And it's kind of heartbreaking, right? Because you want them to get better, and like food is really the only control that they have in these facilities. So, like, when we go in, that, and it's kind of hard because you want them to get whatever they want, but that's not always the case. It's not something that every provider can get for them, which kind of sucks too, but that's the reality of the situation. So, it's always,
I
if you have
know.
any family members in a facility, definitely bring them food in whatever guidelines they have for their diet. But, just check in on them because it's not always easy for them.
I know.
Yeah.
It's always like whenever they have diet restrictions and family members want to bring in food, it's like, I don't
Yeah.
know. Like, we'll have to go ask the doctor or the dietitian or the speech therapist because we don't really know if they can eat whatever you want to bring them.
Hmm.
But we do try to then circle back with the team and be like, hey, like this person's malnourished
Yeah.
and you're monitoring their I's and O's, like
Right.
their intake and output, but they're not eating because they don't like the food and they
Hmm.
don't have their dentures and, all this stuff.
Right.
And it's like, okay, what can we do to try and get this person to get better so they can get out of here.
Yes, no, exactly. And I mean, even if it's not the food portion, because every time I've gone into counsel, more, maybe even like 8 or 9 times out of 10, they just want to talk to somebody too. And that's like a big part of their like they're kind of isolated, right? Like they don't know anybody. You're in this like new environment. So even just having somebody to talk to, it makes a big difference too.
Yeah, for sure. Through this whole conversation, what is like one takeaway that you'd like the audience to consider as it relates to nutrition and aging?
I think I would like the audience to take away that it's never too late to reimagine mealtime for aging adults, or even to explore new ways to change your diet for the better.
Hiral, this was such an insightful conversation. Thank you again for taking the time to join me here today and for sharing your expertise in nutrition and healthy diets.
Thanks so much, Pooja. It was an honor to be on your podcast.
To all my listeners, thank you for tuning into this week's episode on nutrition and aging. Sharing expert perspectives on various age-related topics can help the community learn how to plan for a healthier future. At Caregiver Consulting and Healthy Solutions, we are dedicated to helping you navigate aging together. Tune in next week to shift gears into Save Your Vision Month with a topic on vision and aging. I hope you'll join me again.